Daniel Hucker is here from the Department of History to discuss the history courses and explain what a future history student at Nottingham might expect. Hello, Daniel. Thank you for coming to chat to me. So can you tell me a little bit about what areas of history are offered on a history degree at the University of Nottingham?
Indeed, the history course at Nottingham is really quite broad. That's one of the things we pride ourselves on. So if a student were to study history at Nottingham, they can expect to undertake modules in a range of different periods, a range of different themes, a range of different geographical regions, from the early medieval period, through the early modern period into modern and contemporary history. We also have modules that cover a range of different areas of the globe, notably Britain, of course, Europe also, Russian history, East Asian history, history of the Americas, and so on and so forth. So simply put, because we are a large department, we've got somewhere in excess of 40 permanent full-time members of staff, each with their own specific research interests. We are able to bring that kind of diversity of teaching expertise into the classroom.
And a lot of people thinking of doing history at university would have done it at A-level. How is the step up, what varies?
Yeah, it's quite a difficult and challenging transition from A-level to university study. There are perhaps many reasons why students might find this challenging, but if I was to just pinpoint 3 areas in which I think that transition is particularly notable. The first one is simply time management. So particularly on a history degree, a student will not necessarily have a huge amount of timetabled contact hours on a weekly basis. So students really need to learn how to navigate or to use most effectively and efficiently the non-timetabled hours. And that's quite a challenge for students coming from the A-level context. A second challenge is really becoming an independent learner. So the history program at the university level is usually far less prescribed than it would have been at GCSE or A-level. And a lot of the readings are far less prescribed. So it's really incumbent on the student to use their own initiative and to find their own readings, to do their own research, and to manage their time much more effectively and independently. So that's a significant challenge also. Thirdly, a big challenge is simply not having a parent or a teacher there to be that sort of ever-present presence who's cajoling them to do things and to meet deadlines. So many of our students, especially in year 1, will maybe struggle at first to make that adjustment, to make that transition. But with that in mind, we do design our history program in such a way that becoming that independent thinker, becoming that self-motivated, self-disciplined student, we don't expect students to become that person overnight. That in many ways is the end point of the degree program. So our degree is structured in such a way that there's a clear progression pathway from years 1 through years 2 and then final year, scaffolded by core modules which really provide a bit of a roadmap to help students navigate that journey. Firstly, the transition from school, from A-level through to university, but then the navigation, or to navigate the journey throughout the degree thereafter to become the independent learner, the independent thinker, the critical thinker that hopefully will go on and thrive in the workplace.
And you mentioned earlier you've got 40 tutors who deal with all different types of specialisms. So how do you help a student work out what period of history they want to study?
We do that in the first year by compelling them to study pretty much every single period from the early medieval period all the way through to the contemporary. The first year in particular is much more prescribed than years 2 and 3. I always use the analogy that the first year is a bit like a taster menu at a fancy restaurant. So you don't necessarily get a huge choice about what you eat. Instead, you are presented with a sample, little sort of bite-sized snapshots of all the periods of history. Increasingly, though, through years 2 and especially into year 3, students can, to carry on the analogy, to stretch it a little bit, go à la carte and start increasingly picking those modules that they particularly enjoy, perhaps based on a specific period that they're interested in, perhaps based on a specific approach or type of history that they're interested in. Now, that may well be that what they choose to do in years 2 and particularly in years 3, say in the dissertation, that may well completely mirror the kind of interest that they had on day 1 coming into university, but it could be completely different. We like to give students the opportunity to really experiment, to branch out, to try new things, particularly in first year. and that helps them then make informed decisions about what they want to specialise in by year 3.
And some of those skills that you learn throughout your 3 years studying history, how can they be transferred into the real world?
They can be transferred into the real world in a number of different ways. A history degree is particularly, I think, good at equipping students with a range of transferable skills, a toolkit of skills, which hopefully they can take into a variety of different job opportunities once they graduate. There are many of these skills. A history degree in particular does, I think, equip students with the ability, hopefully, to communicate effectively, both in written communication and in oral communication, and be able to present their findings, present their arguments to a plurality of different audiences. So a history degree really helps cultivate that particular skill set. A history degree also involves working with an abundant plurality of sources, both primary and secondary. So the ability to work with a huge array of sources, the ability to synthesize that information, and the ability to communicate your findings and marshal evidence in support of a particular argument is a core skill set that's particularly necessary in the study of history, but again can be applicable in a range of different workplaces. Above and beyond that, the history program does feature a lot of independent work, notably the dissertation. So history graduates will be very much sort of self-disciplined, independent learners, independent thinkers. But it also involves quite a lot of collaborative work, working with colleagues. So we also, in our students, encourage the cultivation of those team working skills, working towards a common goal. In addition to that, of course, I think the study of the past generally provides an awareness, a growing attentiveness to the different perspectives, different belief systems that increasingly shape and are a core part of the human experience. So in a way, history students are able to work with empathy and openness and respectability, and I think that's also a core skill that our graduates can take into the workplace.
And finally, just keeping on that theme of work after finishing your degree, what are some of the jobs that students who have studied history go into when they graduate?
Yeah. They go into many different disciplines. Some may seem quite obvious, very much linked to the nature of the discipline. For example, becoming history teachers, pursuing my career path and becoming an academic, perhaps working in a cognate sector like the heritage sector, working in museums and archives, that sort of thing. But our graduates have gone on to a range of different employment opportunities, whether it's joining a graduate scheme in retail, whether it's working for the police force or the armed forces or the intelligence service, in the civil service, in marketing, as graduate surveyors. Many of our students will choose to do a law conversion course after their degree and then pursue a career in that area. In short, the history degree in many ways doesn't necessarily train you to be a specific thing, but it leaves a wide number of doors. A huge number of opportunities are still open to history graduates once they leave.
Thank you very much, Daniel. You sold it to me. You can find out more about the course by visiting the website or following the link in the schedule below. And don't forget, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, scan the QR code on screen.